So my name is Bill Giesenthaner. I'm on the board of directors of the Wellesley Conservation Land Trust, and I happen to be a bat enthusiast, among other things. We sponsor occasional walks. Chris Crowley is one of our walk leaders and specializes in geology, but he also did recently the Firefly Walk that we did. And so, keep your radar on for upcoming events. We do several during the year. We love to share nature with folks, and it sounds like most of you are members. And if you're not, you can always join. We're doing a lot of efforts to not only do nature education, but we also sponsor a tuition scholarship. We do land acquisition. We're working on several land acquisition projects right now. So we've become a very active group. And we also advocate in town government for nature-based solutions to the problems that we all face. So I wanted to start just by asking you all what you think about bats, what you know about bats. So chime in, what do you know?
They eat insects?
They eat insects. All of the bats that we'll see tonight are insectivorous, meaning that they eat only insects. There are bats that eat other things. So name a few things that bats eat besides insects.
Fruit, not the bats.
They're fruit bats, mostly in the southwest Pacific. Yep.
Isn't there a fishing bat?
There is a fishing bat. And what it does, it uses its echolocation just like the insect-eating bats do, and it detects ripples on the water, and then it grabs a fish, a little tiny fish usually, that's making the ripples on the water. I've seen them in the Caribbean when I was sailing down there. So fish, yeah, anything else?
I heard blood.
Blood. Everybody comes up with blood. There is one species of bat in South America that does drink a little bit of blood, not enough to hurt anybody, and mostly it's cows that they suck blood from. But of course we've all got the sort of stories of vampire bats. Anything else bats eat? Bats eat bats. There's a species of bats that will catch other bats and eat them. Kind of bad, but they're usually bigger bats eating littler bats. Nectar. So they're very important agriculturally. They pollinate bananas, peaches in some parts of the country, lots of different fruits, agave if you drink tequila. So very important pollinators. So those are the nectar and pollen eating bats. So where do bats live? So belfries, houses, and they usually live in two different, we have 9 species of bats in Massachusetts. We're likely to only detect 1 or 2 species here tonight, but most of the species that we have will hibernate in the winter. So they go to caves and spend the winter in caves, basically asleep. Their pulse rate goes down from like 200 beats per minute to like 5 or 8 beats per minute while they're hibernating. So they become very torpid. I've been in a bat cave one time with a biologist friend, and we could actually reach up and pick a bat off the wall, off the ceiling. And he was doing research on them, so he was taking their internal temperature with a rectal thermometer, and then we could hang them back up. And they'd grab a hold again, and they didn't wake up. They just sort of, yeah, okay. You took my temperature? So wintertime, most of our bats hibernate in caves. There are a couple of species of our 9 species that migrate to the south. So in the summer, when they're having young, they are usually in maternal colonies. So the mothers sort of live together and raise their youngs together. The males sort of are out of the picture. And sometimes those colonies can be very big, sometimes thousands of bats in a colony. Especially that was true of little brown bats. Little brown bats were the most common species here for a long, long time, until white nose syndrome came along. Have you heard of white nose syndrome? It's a fungus that was native to Europe. And the speculation is that spelunkers, people who go into caves, went into a cave in Europe that had this fungus on the walls. Bats in Europe have evolved with that fungus, so it doesn't particularly bother them. But our little brown bat in particular, because it hibernates in very dense colonies, so the spelunkers came back from Europe without cleaning their gear, and they went into a cave in upstate New York. And from there, this white nose syndrome has spread. It's now in, I think, 28 or 30 states. And it started in upstate New York. And it's wiped out 90% of the little brown bats. And I haven't detected a little brown bat in the last 3 or 4 years when I've been doing these programs. The white nose syndrome, I think, came in about 2006, something like that. So it's been around for a while. It's been spreading. And one of the things that I've noticed is as the little brown bat population has gone down, big brown bat population has gone up. So the mosquito-eating niche that the little brown bats were sort of filling is now been opened up for the big brown bats, and they're doing better. Big brown bats don't hibernate in dense colonies, nor do they raise their young in dense colonies. So they're more resistant to this fungus. What happens with the fungus is it sort of grows on their nose. That's why it's called white nose syndrome. And it begins to bother them when they're hibernating, and they'll wake up trying to brush it off, maybe fly around a little bit, but there's no food. So they're being brought out of hibernation, and as a result of being brought out of hibernation and not having food, they starve to death and die. So it's been a real disaster. The other thing I wanted to mention about is, how long do you think bats live? Any guesses? No.
10.
10 years. Good guess. Bats are extremely long-lived for such a small animal. Most birds live 4 years, 3 years. Some bigger birds live longer. Usually the smaller the body size, the less time that it'll live. The record for a little brown bat was 39 years. So, and every year they'll produce 1 to 3 pups. So she was a breeder and produced a lot of young in all of those years. So another thing about bats is that they're pretty much worldwide. They're in almost every continent except the extreme Arctic and Antarctic. They are the 4th largest group of mammals, accounting for, no, they're the 2nd largest group of mammals. So rodents, like mice, is the biggest group of mammals, and then bats are the 2nd biggest group of mammals. There are 13,000 species of bats in the world. So we only have 9 here. In the United States, there's something like, I think, 600, something like that. Any other questions or thoughts about bats?
habitat do they need to survive? Do they do well in suburban lawns?
So the problem with bats and people is that people use pesticides. And bat populations have been really, really damaged by pesticide use. Also, a lot of people don't like bats and try to exterminate them. It's against the law to do that. But people and bats, one of my missions is to try to give you some information about how wondrous bats are and get you a little more enthusiastic about protecting bats because they are very important for a lot of different reasons. We would be carried away by insects if it wasn't for the bats. They eat hundreds of mosquitoes a night, each bat. One biologist estimated that there were like 100 tons of insects that were eaten by the bats within Route 128. So thank goodness for the bats, right? So where were we going with that? You were, yeah, okay, what do they need to live?
We try to extirpate mosquitoes. What do we do with the bats?
So the best thing to do about mosquitoes is to wear the right kind of clothes and the right kind of repellent to keep them away, not broadcasting spray to kill them. For health reasons, if there's an outbreak of equine encephalitis or something like that, that is a real health problem, then spraying is warranted. But most of us aren't in that kind of a situation very often, so we really resist the idea of broadcast spraying. A lot of people actually now hire applicators to spray their yard for mosquitoes and ticks. That's bad. It's bad for the bats, it's bad for the insects, and probably isn't very effective either, really, because once it wears off, once the rain falls, they're back. But you can always wear the right clothes and a little repellent. So bats need insects, so we need to keep, and then need places to stay, and they need places to hibernate. But they do pretty good at finding those places. I just got an email today by somebody who said that they had a bat house and they were skeptical that the bat house didn't have any bats in it. And I said, how do you know? Bat houses, I've had bat houses for years, and they're not used as nurseries. So there's usually not a big colony of them, or not very often. We'll see some bat houses down here on our walk. They're usually used as temporary roosts. So unless you see droppings on the ground underneath the bat house, you don't know whether they've been used or not, because they could just be used as a resting place for one night out of the whole year. Maybe they'd come back several times during the year, maybe not. So it's hard to know whether you have bats or not. I do see droppings under my bat houses from time to time, so I know they get used from time to time. Has anybody had a bat in their house?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are usually young bats. They're like teenagers out exploring, and they get sort of confused and somehow find a way into your house. Best way to deal with that is open doors and windows and turn out the lights, and they'll find the open window or the open door.
You tried the tennis ball.
Yeah. Better just to let them find their own way.
It's like, no, it's like fun. This is how you play. That
Yeah.
was sort of a, I don't know, some
Yeah.
sort of folklore.
They do pretty
Don't
good.
follow the tennis ball.
They do pretty good at finding their own exit if you give them the chance. What else can we say about bats?
Are there any bat species in the U.S. known to be intentional or unintentional pollinators?
Yes, a lot of the southwest bats will pollinate cactuses. So yeah, absolutely. Don't know so much about, there's no New England bats that are pollinators as far as I know. Yep.
Is there a way to stop the fungus?
So people are trying to research that. So I mentioned that the European bats were immune because they evolved with this fungus. And there has been some thought that over time, the 10% of the little brown bats that have survived may be learning behaviors that will help them cope with the fungus. And then people have been experimenting with trying to kill the fungus in the caves, but that's really hard to do. And you know, bats move from cave to cave from time to time, so you might clean up one and it would get reinfected. So there's no good answer to that question yet, but people are working on it. It might be a future career for a biologist to become a specialist in preventing white nose disease. Yep. Anything else? So what I have, oh, already. So what I have is an iPad and a little microphone. And the little microphone fits into the iPad and it picks up the bat calls. And it'll allow us to hear and see them. And it's getting about that time that they should be here. So what this is doing is picking up high-pitched frequency sounds above what we can hear. Some of the static could be insects or it could be just background static. Lots of things make ultrasound. It also picks up a little bit of just regular sound, but it's set to mostly get ultrasound, the high-pitched sounds that we can't hear. And it will not only show us what it's hearing, and we'll be able to hear what the bat call sounds like here, but it'll also identify the species. So it works if you know, if you're a bird watcher and you know about Merlin, which has sound identification. This is very similar to that. There's a library of bat calls that this will compare what it hears to the library, and it'll pick the things that is closest to it. So we can start walking down the road, and as I said last year, one of the kids on the walk said that they saw 40 bats. It could have been the same 4 bats 10 times each. I don't know, but we'll see some bats. I almost guarantee it, especially since you already saw one. So let's walk down the road. It's a company called Wildlife Acoustics. They're in Maynard, so they're a local company. There's more bats in Latin America, a lot more. But I don't know the answer to that question. When I've traveled in Latin America, the number of bats that I pick up is like 20 times what we get here. There. You can hear the chirp and that signature. Now, I'll start recording, and if it comes back. So it...
Oh, it's the red bat.
Yeah, it could be. I get skeptical of... Unless I have a really good signal, I get a little skeptical of the ID. Eastern red bats, it's called twice, and it seems pretty sure. Eastern red bat is one of the species we could have.
You can see here.
Yeah.
Smell?
Smell?
Oh.
If you're in a colony, you can definitely smell. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. So these are big browns. So I'm pretty sure we've had both the eastern red bat and big brown bats. Yeah, and they nest in trees. So the chirps we're hearing, they send out, it's like radar or sonar. They send out a pulse and it bounces off what's in front of them. About maybe 50 feet in front of them, they can sort of get a call back. And when you hear a really rapid set of pulses, it means they're on to prey. So every now and then we're hearing instead of so the is when they're locked onto prey. Since they don't see well. So there is one species of bat living in Wellesley that is on the federal and state endangered species list that is called the long-eared bat. And so they have a special protected status. I've never gotten them here, but they do. There is a colony living in Wellesley. At this time of night, they're out hunting for food. They slept all day and they're hungry. This is breakfast time. But during the night, they'll get filled up with food and they'll go rest somewhere. But you almost never see them because they're usually hidden pretty well. They won't necessarily go back to their nursery colony. At this time of year, the young are out hunting on their own and the parents aren't taking care of them anymore. Maybe helping them, maybe teaching them a little bit, but that one got really close. Sometimes they'll come close because we're attracting insects. All of us breathing out our carbon dioxide is one of the things that attracts insects. So they can detect a human hair. So their sonar detection is really, really good. Yeah. So the line on top is sort of the magnitude. It's how strong the signal is. And this is sort of the pattern. So when this gets really big, it means it's really close. We've only seen two, the eastern red bat and the big brown bat.
So when it's showing two species,
It's giving you what it most thinks it is and a possible alternative. So it's possible. Yeah, it's in this area. Actually, you set this for the state that you're in.
Oh.
So
it's like
So it's just like Merlin.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a little costly, and they quit making it.
Oh really?
Yeah, I think they make a version that won't work with an iPad anymore. It's because Apple is so proprietary about their plugins and stuff that they gave up trying to work with. So we can go all the way down to the pond. I don't know that I'll be able to show you any more than I've already shown you, but it's a nice walk all the way down to the pond if we want to go. Yeah. So the little brown bats and the big brown bats will find caves, old mines or caves.
Even around here.
Yeah, or further north. Most of them, probably have parents who grew up and teach them where they go.
So they will leave this area, do you think, to hibernate?
Some of them will stay. and find a place to hibernate here.
Yeah.
So this has told me I've seen 3 or 4 species, and some of them I'm skeptical of. Unless I'm getting really good signals that look good and strong, sometimes the identification makes me a little skeptical. But these, I'm sure we've had big brown and eastern red. So, I mean, my voice even has a little bit of ultrasound in it. So almost everything does. But what we hear isn't the ultrasound part. So I thought our destination would be the bat house down here. Just a little bit further down, there's a bat house. I have no idea whether it's ever been occupied or not. I've never checked for droppings underneath it. Could be the bat box has been removed. I don't see it.
There's another one round the other side.
Yeah. One of the things I'm noticing is how few bats there are down here. And, you know, you'd think that the pond would have a lot of insects, but I'm not getting any detection of bats. And it could be that the insects have all just sort of moved up into the woods. Have a lot of insects associated with them, yeah. So this was kind of my destination. That
There's
and
a lot up by the vernal pool on where the boardwalk is. The bats are coming up.
there could be some there. Yeah, I've never checked it. So I think I'll cut out the static. So should we head back?
So a group from Wellesley College had to leave, but they said to thank you. They said the word got spread at the college.
Oh, good.
So it's good to hear.
Yeah. Those of us are old enough remember having to stop as we drove and clean the bugs off the windshield.
Oh, yeah.
It was, now you hardly have any bugs on your windshield.